Good afternoon or good morning on the West Coast. My name is Josh Stevens, an attorney with McMurray & Schuster. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on understanding UDAP laws. When does creative advertising become deceptive? Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes here. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please do put those in the question box or the chat box. We probably will not have time to get to those because this is a half-hour webinar, but we will review them and follow up with you afterwards. Also, if you have to hop off the webinar for any reason, or maybe you get on a little late, or just have something where you miss a part, the recording of the webinar will be available in about 24 hours on our website. As I mentioned, my name is Josh Stevens. I'm a senior attorney in our compliance department with a focus on marketing and privacy compliance. Joined today by my colleague, Erica. Erica, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Hollar, also a senior attorney at McMurray & Schuster. And I, like Josh, work with compliance. I also handle some litigation and regulator investigations. So happy to be with you guys all today.
Yeah, and happy to have you on, Erica. I think it's always great when we have multiple angles on these webinars, and you certainly bring both of those perspectives of the proactive and the reactive. So glad to have you.
Yeah, and just also, Josh, for some background so everyone knows, I think Josh and I both share a little different perspective. I just actually rejoined the firm probably about 6 months ago. I had previously been working at a large retailer here in Columbus, Ohio, in-house, working a lot with their marketing. So I'm very familiar with this topic. And like you said, Josh, glad to have you join me as well.
Yeah. And as always with our presentations, keep in mind, these are done at a high level just to provide some education. They are not intended to be legal advice. They do not form an attorney-client relationship. Everybody's situation is different. A lot of these things, especially in marketing, are very fact specific. So you're definitely going to want to talk to counsel before you act on anything that we discuss here today. And with that, Erica, why don't you kick us off here and let us know what we're talking about.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So this is just a very high level agenda of what we're going to cover today. First thing, obviously, is what is UDAP? It's kind of the cornerstone of all things marketing as it relates to legality and rules. We're going to then look to what is a claim, what claims are included in your advertising, how do you substantiate those claims, and we can talk about what that means. And then we'll conclude with just from here on out, what does my company do to try to minimize our legal risks, and what can I do to make sure that we are doing everything possible to meet the requirements of the law. So like I said, the first question is, what is UDAP? Some of you may have heard this phrase before, some of you may not, but generally speaking, UDAP stands for Unfair and Deceptive Acts and Practices. And like I said, this is kind of the cornerstone of legal requirements when it comes to not only marketing and advertising, but consumer protection laws in general. So all states have some form of UDAP statutes. They may vary, a little bit here and there, but the main premise is that any supplier or retailer, anyone engaging with consumers, is prohibited from taking place with any unfair, deceptive acts or practices. Now, who enforces this? Like I said, each state has their own version of these laws, as well as we have federal laws. The state laws are typically governed by state attorneys general, and oftentimes you'll see the federal law governed by the FTC. So, that's kind of the big, what is it, who enforces it? And you guys are all probably asking, why does this matter to me? Well, the reason that it matters to you is because not only do you want to stay compliant with the laws, but unfortunately, a lot of times the monetary penalties associated with these sorts of violations can be very, very hefty. Not only that, if you're dealing with consumers, you want to be able to have trust with your consumers. So aside from, a technical violation of the law, you want your consumers to trust your product. You want to be able to convey a message to your consumers and them to really believe in it. So that's the cornerstone of why this all matters to you. So Josh, if you want to switch to the next slide, here's just a few. I've got, I think, 4 examples of different enforcement actions, either through state regulators or some states provide a private remedy for consumers themselves, including class action lawsuits. So in 2010, the first example is Activia. They had to engage in a settlement of $45 million because of how they were marketing their product. They said that they were clinically and scientifically proven to boost your immune system and to help regulate digestion. And we'll talk a little bit about it later in the presentation, but any claims that you make that are premised on health benefits or safety, they're held to a higher standard. So not only did they maybe not have the substantiation that they needed to meet what just a general claim would be, these clinically and scientifically proven claims would be held to that higher standard that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And then another one, the FTC gave Luminosity a $2 million fine, which for those of you that don't know is an app that helps to, they say, keep your brain sharp, those sorts of things. And the company deceived players with unfounded advertising claims. So again, it's just all about, what are you telling consumers? Is it true? And do you have the information to back that up? Going to the next page, here's another example. These are from 2009 and 2010, I believe. These are copies of what the actual cereal boxes looked like for the mini wheats. You'll see that it states that it was clinically shown to improve 20% attentiveness, along with the Cocoa Crisps talks about boosting your child's immunity by 25%. So you can see there that the dollar amount that resulted from those claims, because they were found to be deceptive, they're pretty hefty. So that's why not only do you want to keep your customers confident with your products, but the dollar amounts can potentially be very, very hefty. So that's why this matters to you. So
Yeah,
Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. And I think you can see already a trend here when we're talking about a claim as to what it is, right? A claim is something that is measurable, it's observable, it's testable. I like to think about these as, is it something that my 5 senses can measure, right? Can sense, or is it something that a scientific instrument can sense? Or is it something that you can do a study to figure out? And so when you're thinking about a claim, it's something more than puffery. We're going to talk about puffery in a second, but it's something that really says, sort of like the mini wheats box said, right? This product does X, or this product has Y quality, and keep in mind, when we're talking about claims that appear in advertisements, what constitutes an advertisement is very broad, right? So it's everything that we traditionally think of in terms of, print ads, radio, television, online, so on and so forth, but also social media and testimonials. And this is an area where a lot of our clients get in trouble when we have to, kind of help them out, is they forget sometimes that if they have a social media influencer who goes out and says something about their product on Instagram, if that influencer misrepresents something about that product, it's as if the company itself did. And so you really need to have controls around what your social media influencers say. because that can come back on you. Likewise with testimonials. If you've got somebody who, you're publishing a testimonial, I hear this all the time. People say, well, it's not me saying that, it's John Smith on Twitter who said that, and all I did was just put it on my website and blast it out on social media and incorporate it into a television ad. But I didn't say it. That doesn't work. You're taking that person's speech and you're promoting it. It's now your speech from an enforcement perspective. So you got to make sure that it's accurate. So drilling down on claims just a little bit more, one of the things that I hear from a lot of people is, okay, well, what if it's something that the consumer can easily tell is false? So, the consumer can actually observe and measure this on their own. They don't need me to tell them necessarily. Well, you might get a little more leeway there. You still shouldn't misrepresent things. But if, a consumer, for example, is sent a sample of a product in advance and they're able to tell that, you say it's super smooth, you send them a sample, let's say it's a face cream, and they think, oh, actually it's pretty gritty because they were able to test it themselves. You could have a difference of opinion there. What is smooth? What is gritty? Right? And that, you might get a little more leeway. And the other thing that people think about is, well, does it really matter? So if I say X, what if it's something that a consumer isn't really going to care about? Well, you can get into a materiality argument. So when we think about, claims and whether they're deceptive, well, it needs to be something that's likely to mislead consumers. Note there, actual deception is not required. It just needs to be likely to mislead. You can get into an argument of, but if it's not material, is it really relevant? And so that's an area where you can have argument. And like I mentioned, puffery is not a claim. And so, you see like here on your screen, right, with Papa John's, better ingredients, better pizza, or, world's best coffee, something like that. That's subjective opinion that there's a presumption that a reasonable consumer can look at that and say, yeah, I know that's opinion. That's their opinion. I can have my own opinion about the product. I'm not going to take this literally. But where we see sometimes clients get a little into a little gray area is with something like they might say, let's use world's best coffee. They might say Americans' favorite coffee. Well, now you're starting to step into a world of, is that something that's actually measurable, right? Because you can do a survey, you can do a study of consumer perceptions about that coffee to see if it is America's favorite coffee. And, I talked about earlier how, these marketing things are very fact intensive, right? This is an area where we start getting very fact intensive. So when you're using claims like, it's X group's favorite thing, or you see a lot with toothpaste, right? 4 out of 5 doctors recommend Crest or whatever, toothpaste is in the ad. Those are things that now are probably starting to cross into the line of claims and really do need to be backed up. It's not mere puffery. So Erica, how do we back up those claims?
So we'll talk a little bit more later about, how I actually back it up. But just as far as a process, as you are all creating your marketing pieces, looking to influencers or customer testimonials, is just a list of basics that you can almost use as like a checklist for what you need before you disseminate that advertisement. And that exactly is the first point, is all of these state laws and the FTC require that you have substantiation prior to disseminating an advertisement. So for example, say you make a claim about, let's just take Josh's example about the Crest toothpaste. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Crest toothpaste. You would need to have actual documents prior to running that ad that where you can prove that 4 out of the 5 actually do recommend it. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit later about what that form can take on, but here the point is you need to have that before you run the ad. It shouldn't be a retroactive thing where you get customer complaints or customer questions, or God forbid a regulator sending you a letter asking about these claims, and you say, oh, let me go pull together what I was thinking of when I did this. That's probably not going to bode very well for you. And then again, Josh talked a lot about reasonable interpretation. So if we send a product to a customer for a sample, is it smooth, is it gritty? The marketer and the advertiser, you are responsible for all reasonable interpretations of whatever claim you're making. So now that's not to say that you're responsible for unreasonable interpretations, but we all know that certain people interpret things different ways. So, that's just something that you'll want to take into consideration prior to deciding what language it is that you want to use in your marketing. Another checklist item would be to be aware that, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the next slide, but you must substantiate all claims that are either express or implied. That's important because sometimes, the express ones are easy. It's something that you're saying 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this, but the implied claims can trip clients up sometimes. It's, something like putting a product on a package that is submerged in water. Well, the nature of that would imply that that product is waterproof. And, if a customer purchases this product and puts it in the water and it doesn't work, that's an issue because that is considered an implied claim that would need to be substantiated. Again, we'll talk about the level of substantiation that is needed. Again, this is very fact specific, so it depends on what the claim is and how it's presented to the customer. And then the next thing is kind of the level of scrutiny that is looked at a claim. So for most claims, you just need a reasonable basis for making a claim. You need to have some sort of evidence that you looked at, or some sort of test report or something that gives you a reasonable basis for making this claim. And if it's a claim that's true and it's not deceptive, that's typically not an issue. Where you can sometimes get into issues is if you are making claims about any health or safety claims, those are often held to a higher standard. And what's required for those is competent and reliable evidence. Some examples of those are tests or studies or other scientific evidence that has been evaluated specifically by people who are qualified to review that particular evidence. So for instance, if you are making a claim on a store brand product, that the product itself is comparable to, let's think of Tylenol. You've got your Kroger brand Tylenol, and you say this is comparable to Tylenol brand. You would need to have a test report that would be reviewed by someone who is competent to review that test report, not a report that was reviewed and or drafted by John Smith. So it's just a little, if you are making any health or safety claims, the standard's just a little bit higher, and I think we can all understand why that is and why that makes sense. But I want you all to recognize that given COVID and where we are right now, this is particularly important. You see products that have antimicrobial or 67% effective to take hand sanitizer. There's all of those claims about the effectiveness of health claims, and those are really under a spotlight now, and regulators are really paying attention to those. So just be sure if you're making any sort of those claims that you are that you have the evidence that you need. So again, we talked pretty briefly about claims can be expressed or implied. I talked about the product being submerged in water. This is an example that could have been on a mouthwash bottle. So the first example you see there, ABC mouthwash prevents colds. That's a pretty express claim that if you use this mouthwash, it will help you prevent colds. Now, whether that's true and whether ABC company can substantiate that claim, that's kind of a different issue, but the claim itself is an express claim. And then take the second claim, ABC mouthwash kills the germs that cause colds. It's not directly saying that it can cause the cold, but a reasonable consumer would infer that, okay, it's killing the germs that cause the cold, therefore I'm not getting a cold. So that's the distinction there between an express and implied claim. Remember that they both must be substantiated. You're responsible for any reasonable interpretation, and like I said, whether this product actually does that or not is kind of beside the point, but hopefully that helps to know the distinction. So again, how do I substantiate these claims? I've got my claims I want to put in my marketing. I've thought about them. I know they're not true, or I know that they're true. I know they're not deceptive. So what do I need to keep? And that just depends on what the claim is. So for, we'll go back to the toothpaste example. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Crest. We would need a document or some sort of survey where we have documents that we can rely on to show that 4 out of those 5 dentists that we surveyed did recommend it, or tests prove. In that case, we need a test. Studies show we would need a study. So what you need really depends on the nature of the claim. And again, I'll mention it just because I think it's so important. If it's one of those health or safety claims, that standard is a little higher. So you would want to pay particular attention to what it is that you are obtaining and how it was reviewed, those sorts of things. So yeah, so hopefully that's helpful on what it is and how we get it.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. And just to build off what you said, one of the other things that I know we often remind clients is substantiation can get stale. And so, the exact period of time before some sort of substantiation is stale is going to vary, by product, by industry, by claim, frankly. But generally speaking, we usually recommend to clients that, on an annual basis, you should go through your claims that you're still using, look at the substantiation that you have, make sure it's still up to date and current. Because if 4 out of 5 dentists recommended Crest in 1999, that doesn't mean that 4 out of 5 will recommend it in 2020. So it's always important to do those reviews on a set cadence, so you make sure your substantiation is always up to date. Now, Erica's been talking about health statements as something that's highly scrutinized. So I'm going to take these bullets out of order and start with the health statements, because I think, these things are top of mind for everyone right now. And in fact, we've seen a huge uptick in enforcement related to health claims because of COVID, and a lot of companies trying to emphasize how their product can help consumers during this challenging time. And some of the things that I have seen out there in the marketplace that raise concern are, for example, people conflating viruses and bacteria into just a general category of germs. They're two different things. The chemicals that kill one may not kill the other. Some chemicals may kill both. Some chemicals may kill certain viruses and leave other ones. If you ever actually read the back of a Lysol can, there's actually a lot of information on there about the specific types of bacteria and viruses that their product kills. So marketers have to be careful. There's a Microban commercial that I've been seeing here recently that I think does a pretty good job of delineating what exactly the product does. They explain it kills 99% of viruses and bacteria on contact and continues killing bacteria for 24 hours. So, they're making sure that the consumer understands what that product does. And anytime you're representing that a product can treat or cure something, you're stepping into FDA medication regulation zone. And there was in fact a case early on in COVID where there was a televangelist who was advertising this solution that had silver in it as a cure for COVID. And the FTC came down hard on him because that is now stepping into FDA world, and there's nothing to back that up. It has not gone through the FDA medication review process. It's not an approved medication, and that's one of the reasons why you see on like supplements, they always say, right, these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, because when you step into that world, that's a whole nother thing. Two other types of claims that are really highly scrutinized: made in USA claims. Our firm actually worked a little while back on a case for a client that made super glue, where there was an issue related to making a made in USA claim related to that super glue, because one of the chemicals that went into it came from China. And under FTC guidance, in order to say something's made in the USA, it not only has to have its final assembly and processing done in the USA, it needs to be made up of all or substantially all US components. In fact, the FTC says that the foreign components have to be negligible. And there are all kinds of different examples that they give. But if the ingredient that comes from the foreign source is sort of critical to the manufacturing of the final product, that's not going to be negligible, even if it's a tiny percentage cost-wise or something. So anytime you make a made in USA claim, always talk to counsel, because you really do have to go back through the supply chain to understand, can I make that claim, or do I need to make a claim more like assembled in USA or made in USA of domestic and imported ingredients. Also, green statements. So anything about, a product is, earth smart, it's recyclable, it's degradable, it's made with renewable energy, right? These are very popular statements right now. And there actually is a lot of regulation around these. The FTC has what's referred to as the green guides, that if you want to look them up, are at 16 CFR Part 260, that put very strict rules around a lot of these claims. Now, these are a little different than claiming something is like organic or natural. Now, the FTC has warned about those types of claims too, because they might be too vague to really have meaning. But if you're going to say something is, ozone safe, recyclable, non-toxic, degradable, made with renewable energy, anything like that, you definitely have got to look at those FTC green guides and make sure that you're staying within them.
Josh,
And
I
so,
just
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
go back. I just wanted to add something. We talked about the made in the USA and kind of the restrictions that are on it. Sometimes it might seem daunting if you want to convey some sort of similar message on your products, but keep in mind that you can get creative with these. If you look at some of your Apple products, you'll see that they say designed by Apple in Cupertino, California. So, we're kind of in an era where shopping locally and those sorts of things are, I don't want to say trendy, but it's important to consumers now. So as you're trying to come up with these claims, obviously stay within the borders of the law, but take the opportunity to get creative and, make your products a little more personable about, that's kind of cool. It's designed in Cupertino, but assembled in China, that sort of thing. So while we're kind of giving you all these rules, know that there are opportunities to be creative and state things. It's just a matter of how you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so as we round out here, right, just to refresh, right? First, You should always evaluate your claims, evaluate them before you make them, continue to evaluate them while they're out in the marketplace. Are they true? Are they deceptive? How would a consumer interpret them, right? Have your substantiation. Get those documents on file prior to publishing your ad. And then lastly, keep records. All those substantiation documents need to be maintained. They need to be easily accessible. We usually recommend at least 5 years keeping them on file from whenever the last time was you ran the ad with the claim. And, you know, always look back on them to make sure that everything is the way it needs to be. And so with that, our half hour has come to a close. Thank you everyone for joining today. Again, if you have any questions at the end, our emails and phone numbers are here on the screen. Feel free to reach out to us. And with that, we hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.